Richard Saren's Strange Planet. Following the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
Hey, welcome to the program, friends. Say hello to my technical producer, David Gaskin. Listeners, David Gaskin, listeners. A little rushed getting into the studio. Just down the hall, there's a larger studio, and we were shooting some segments for the TV show, the conspiracy show. And didn't leave me a lot of time after we were finished there, and I was hungry. So I jumped in the car. I said, David, I've been doing the show here at 550 Queen for almost 3 years. It will be the third anniversary on August the 16th. And I haven't even ventured really into the neighborhood because normally I've eaten by the time I get here. But I was hungry. So I said, David, where can I go? And he just pointed that way. So I drove over that beautiful little bridge over the Don River and into, Queen Street East. And there I found this little sushi place, nice little place. And but you'd think after all these years in broadcasting I'd know better. I ordered takeout, a steaming container of beef udon noodles. I mean, this thing, it might cool down by the time I turn out the lights and say goodnight. But what am I going to do with a steaming? I can't eat this. I'll just slurp it through a straw very quickly during the breaks. If I had to do it all over again, I would have ordered it much earlier. If I had to do it, I could do it all over again if we had time machines, of course, right? I could step into a little machine and go back in time. And we're going to talk about, that is my favorite topic, if you didn't know already. Time travel? Come on. Is that not the coolest thing to contemplate, being able to travel backwards and forwards in time? And we're going to get into that right away. But first, let me welcome another affiliate to the program. Very, very honored and pleased to welcome WIXI-AM in Birmingham, Alabama, to the Conspiracy Show. So to all the folks down at WIXI-AM, Birmingham, welcome aboard. And we'll just add that to our burgeoning list of affiliates, WKAC-AM in Huntsville, Alabama, and WZGM-AM Asheville, North Carolina, and of course, our flagship station here at the new AM 740 Zoomer Radio in Toronto, Canada. All right, let's talk time travel, folks. And we're going to do that with this is one of those rare individuals who is able to just churn out quality material. It seems like, I'm going to ask her, but I'm betting you she puts out about 3 great books a year. Maybe 2, but this is another good one. It's called This Book is from the Future, A Journey Through Portals, Relativity, Wormholes, and Other Adventures in Time Travel. Marie Jones is a best-selling author, screenwriter, researcher, radio show host, and public speaker. She's the author of This Book is from the Future, which I just mentioned, and a whole whack of other great books. Marie Jones, welcome once again to the Conspiracy Show. How are you?
I'm good. Good to talk to you again.
Good to have you on with us once again. I first got really excited about time travel, like a lot of people, reading H.G. Wells. And then I met this gentleman from the University of Connecticut, Professor Mallet.
Oh, yes.
Who's working on a theoretical time machine, and the whole backstory of how, his father, who he just idolized and worshipped, the sun, rose and set on his father. And when he passed away suddenly in his 30s, in the 50s, Ronald Mallet was absolutely devastated. And then he retreated into this world of comic books and started reading H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, and figured if I can build my own time machine, I'll travel back. I still get a lump in my throat telling this story. I'll travel back in time to save my father. And Here is Ronald Mallet now in his 60s, and he still feels the same way. Now he realizes, because of certain paradoxes, he can't travel back in time to save his father, but he's still, working away on a theoretical time machine.
Exactly.
Marie, when did you first get interested in the concept of time travel?
Oh, since childhood. I was one of those kids that liked science and science fiction stories, and growing up with Star Trek and Star Wars and all the different science fiction movies and TV shows. I mean, it's everywhere. It was in novels and short stories. And I think naturally we're drawn to trying to control things that we can't control. Space, where we're sort of, over my lifetime, I've seen a lot of real wonderful and amazing progress in space travel. But time is the one thing we haven't been able to really do that with yet. So I think it's a human fascination to be able to control time. I think we all inherently want to go back and relive some times from our past, or try to change things, or see into the future, see what we're going to become, or what our families will become, or what might happen, if the world might end. So I think it's part of our humanity, but it's the one thing too that really we have not been able to control yet.
We should also point out that you wrote this book along with your co-author, Larry Flaxman. Marie Jones is with us. This book is from the future. I need you to help me out with something, Marie, because every time I ask a theoretical physicist or an astrophysicist, I ask him this question, I get a different answer. And maybe you had the same experience. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, or special theory of relativity, did it allow or forbid time travel into the future?
Well, it's sort of ambiguous, because without us being able to move beyond the limitations of light speed, it doesn't matter. I mean, everything that Einstein did and everything that he, all of the laws that he discovered hinted at the possibility. Certainly there is the theory of, or not the theory, it's actually a law of time dilation, and the fact that when you're traveling as closer to the speed of light, time will slow down. The problem is that we can't go back into the past or into the future without first breaching the speed of light. And that was one of Einstein's biggest challenges. He died before he could figure it out, and we still, after his death, we still haven't figured out that limitation. But everything that he did, his work with Nathan Rosen into wormholes, which were called Einstein-Rosen bridges, all under the theory that perhaps these were shortcuts through space and time that could be used. So it's almost like all of the work he did was a part of his desire to see time travel become a reality. He was obsessed, obviously, with space, and time and space are interconnected, so therefore he was obsessed with time. But again, always coming up to that light speed limitation, and he died before he could find a way around it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't scientists today, or maybe in the near future, that will do that.
And time travel to the future is obviously the big stumbling block, because theoretically, not even theoretically, practically, we have proven that time travel to the past, nanoseconds, mind you, but time travel to the past is feasible, and in fact, we've done it with those, that experiment with the big 2 atomic clocks, right?
Right. Well, actually, there have been some experiments with photons, with light particles, where they have sent them into the future. But again, like you said, a nanosecond of a nano of a nanosecond. And certainly this is on a particle level, and in no way can it yet be extrapolated to anything bigger than that. But a lot of these physicists believe that time travel to the future is actually more doable because of the paradoxes of, if you go back into the past, how do what do you do to the current timeline? What might you change, or how could you change the current timeline? Because if you go back to the past, you're going to affect something. So you have all these paradoxes.
Right, the grandfather paradox, where you accidentally run over your granddad, therefore your parents aren't born, therefore you're not born.
Exactly. So future time travel is actually more, I don't want to say acceptable, that might not be the right word, but more theoretically doable than traveling back to the past because of all those paradoxes. However, what's really cool, and we wrote a lot about it in the book, is that there is a way around those paradoxes to travel back in the past. And that would be if you were to introduce the idea of parallel universes, or the multiverse theory, the idea that there are other timelines, alternate timelines, where you could go back and you could shoot your grandfather and kill him because maybe he's a jerk. And in that particular timeline, yes, you would not be born. But in an offshoot, the multiverse theory proposes that every time there is a decision or choice made, another universe springs forth to accommodate all the other choices and decisions that could have been made. So maybe in timeline A, you're not going to exist. But in timeline B, you will. And timeline F and G and Z and, on and on. So, but that's all theoretical. So that's like the only way around the paradoxes right now is to think of, well, okay, maybe there's more than one timeline. And we can go back and we can mess up one. And it may mess up this future timeline that we're in now, but it won't in other universes, other dimensions, what have you.
Not to be a real stickler, Marie, but would that technically be time travel, or would you simply be jumping to another dimension? A multiverse.
You're right, because in the timeline that you're in, you're pretty much voiding your own existence. So yes, it is interdimensional. And what's really cool is that these, again, are ideas that have been present in science fiction forever. So what's real interesting is that then you have science, you have physicists catching up and actually looking at the paradoxes that were first introduced in a lot of science fiction and saying, okay, these are real, these paradoxes. How do we get around them? How do we get around causality, the idea that cause and effect, if you go back in time and you change one cause, you're going to change a whole series of follow-up cause and effects from that. I don't know if you've read the book by Stephen King that came out not too long ago.
On JFK?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Sort of the what-if type scenarios, if JFK had lived? Is that the same one we're talking about?
No, well, what he does is he tells the story of a guy who is given the ability to go back in time and stop the assassination.
Right.
But what he does is just so brilliantly show how these paradoxes come into play and how you go back in time and think that you're changing something for the betterment of humanity and end up making it much worse.
Exactly. Listen, I gotta take a time out. Marie, we'll come back on the other side. Marie Jones, this book is from the future. It doesn't matter how you cut it. If you travel back in time, sooner or later, you're going to have to sit through the ice capades again. That should be enough to swear anyone off. Time travel. Back with more of The Conspiracy Show. Don't go away.
The truth will set you free. But first, it will really tick you off. Welcome back to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
David, is that from Planet of the Apes? Is that John Williams? Or it sounds somewhat reminiscent of that scene in Planet of the Apes, the original movies, where they're racing through the cornfield and the gorillas are on horseback. And imagine stepping into a time machine and there's a multiverse scenario from hell, right? Ending up in a Planet of the Apes. Marie Jones is with us, and this book is from the future, a journey through portals, relativity, wormholes, and other adventures in time travel. The co-author is Larry Flaxman. Marie, you were telling me about Stephen King's, one of his, I guess it's his latest book. Who knows? What time is it?
I think you might have had another one just recently.
Exactly. In the elevator on the way up to his apartment.
Yeah, exactly.
But JFK, and the scenario is someone travels back in time and saves JFK's life, thinking it would be a good idea, but it sets a whole bunch of other things in motion that aren't so good.
Right. And the idea also is that, and I won't give away too much, it's just an absolutely amazing book. And Stephen King actually did a lot of research and worked with a researcher, looking at all the different paradoxes and really getting into them. And it's such a wonderful education. If you don't feel like reading the more physics nonfiction books, I mean, you could read his book and really get an education on why this is such a problem. The character in the book at the same time tries to make another small change. So, I mean, stopping an assassination is a big change. And obviously the cause and effect chain that would create would be massive. But he also makes the point of trying to change something very small and personal. And yet that also creates a chain of cause and effect that is disastrous. So the whole idea is, can we go back to the past and fix something without breaking the future? And I thought that was just a wonderful way to look at it. We have no idea the butterfly effect, the very smallest, most minute change that we might make, how that could snowball and create something that we just can't even imagine in the future. So it's really a good wake-up call for the ethics and morality of time travel, which Larry and I talk a lot about in the book too, because it's not something people think about that often.
Well, it's also a wonderful lesson for just how we conduct our daily lives. If granted, if you travel back in time, everything you do will have consequences, but that also applies to the here and now. Everything you do will set in motion an incredible, domino effect for good or bad, and it's up to us.
Right.
I guess.
And why do most people want to go back in time? They want to fix something.
Yeah, regret.
Don't screw up now, and you won't want to go back to the past 10 years from now and fix. You won't have anything to fix. So it really is about regret and bad decisions and not thinking about what you're doing. And yet also realizing how interconnected everything is. And the idea is that you could go back in time and change something in your life. Could kiss that girl that you always wanted to kiss in high school, or, catch that ball in Little League that you dropped, what have you. What you don't realize, though, is how you're affecting everybody around you whose lives, because of those simple things, are also going to be changed. And that's where the idea of ethics comes into play. Does anybody have the right to go back in time and change an interconnected web of timelines that are all working together with cause and effect?
It's an excellent point, because when we think of the grandfather paradox, that's pretty cut and dried. But what you're saying is everywhere you step, if you travel back in time, everywhere you step, you're creating a paradox. It's unavoidable. There's nothing you can do but create, a paradox or potential problems going forward. So it's a minefield. It's a minefield.
And not doing anything. You're still changing something. You're revisiting the past alone is an act of change.
What about mentally traveling back in time, like remote viewers, for example,
Yes.
who believe that they can transcend time and space, but they're not physically. Let's say someone wants to go back and witness the crucifixion of Jesus Christ to see if it actually happened, and there they are. But it's from what you tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that it would be like them watching a movie. They're not actually able to manipulate their environment, interact with it. So they would avoid the paradoxes by remote viewing to the past, correct?
I don't know, and here's why. The observer effect kicks in, right?
Yes.
And everybody says, oh, okay, well, I just want to go back to the past and I just want to observe. But the act of observation is an act of measurement, and quantum physics tells us that creates a change. So here again, we have the paradox jumping up at us, even if we just want to go back and watch. That observer effect comes into play. Just the fact that you're going back into the past and observing something that already happened. That act alone is going to change the outcome. However, there is something called chronesthesia, and that's a name for mental time travel. And there's a lot of research going on. This is so fascinating to me because I really believe that we time travel all the time, consciously, in our conscious minds and our subconscious, and dreams and deja vu and precognition and remote viewing. We are able to go back to the past and forward into the future, not physically and not in any way where we could really alter anything. It's just more of a perception. But when you physically go back, you're changing something. Your act of observation is changing something. So remote viewing gets really tricky because are you physically somehow, even though your body's not doing the remote, not going somewhere, you're sending your consciousness. Now, is your consciousness enough to be considered an observer? So that brings that whole idea of the quantum observer effect into play. And could we mess up the past and future just by doing that? I don't know.
Although some people have described remote viewing as, some refer to the Akashic record, and you're simply maybe it's pulling a video off a library shelf and reviewing something that's already taken place.
I like that idea because I feel like remote viewing is people tapping into what Larry and I call the grid of information, the 0-point field, the Akashic records. There's so many different names that it's gone by.
Right.
This field of information that contains past, present, and future all embedded in it. And we're looking, like you said, it's like going through the old card catalog in a library or you're watching a video. So in that sense, and I think that people who are psychic, and when you have an ESP experience, people who have precognitive visions or dreams, even deja vu, I think that these are different ways that we are tapping into this field or into this grid and just getting information out of it, but not changing anything.
Marie Jones is the co-author of this book, Is From the Future, A Journey Through Portals, Relativity, Wormholes, and Other Adventures in Time Travel. We'll open up the phone lines and make those available for those who want to get in on the discussion, and we'll roll out the phone numbers here in just a moment. But there's another idea, and I think Einstein and some of his colleagues were touching on this. You mentioned wormholes and black holes and how they may be a shortcut. So that would, in effect, do away with the need to obtain light speed. If you can take basically a shortcut from this end of the galaxy to the other by whipping through a wormhole or something like that. So in effect, maybe the entire universe is a time machine, Marie.
It could be. Wormholes are theoretical. I mean, we know that there are black holes, but the idea of a wormhole is that you have a black hole at one end, you have sort of a tube, that's an invisible tube through time-space that connects to a white hole, which is really just a black hole at another end. And it could be another end of our universe, it could be another end in a parallel universe, and there can actually be what are called time wormholes, which connect, say, the past to the present to the future to the past. It's all theoretical, but the idea is that if these exist and if we can find a way to get around some of the problems, such as keeping the throat of the wormhole open so it doesn't turn you into a piece of spaghetti with that gravitational pull, and the idea of sending a person through a wormhole is still science fiction. But again, the idea is, well, what if something can go through, even a particle? Then we know theoretically it might be extrapolated to something bigger later on down the line. But, wormholes are like the multiverse. They're sort of ways around the paradoxes and the problems. So until we can prove, maybe at the Large Hadron Collider, that there are such things as wormholes, it remains theoretical.
Well, getting back to Professor Mallet for a moment, and his, my understanding is incredibly rudimentary, but his idea is that if you could stir the time-space fabric, much the same as you would stir coffee with a stir stick.
Right.
And you create that little, what would you call that, little whirlpool in there.
Right.
And then if you were to drop something into that whirlpool, that, in effect, is what you want to create with a time machine.
Right.
And he's saying that the amount of energy that would be required, to open up a space large enough for a human to fit in would be, beyond our ability. It would require the power of several suns, probably. But he theorizes that he could at least send bits of information through a time machine, and it could act as an early warning device. So let's say tomorrow there's an earthquake. We could let people know 2 years, back that there's an earthquake coming, and they could prepare.
Right, exactly. And that's, sending information is sending something on the particulate level. It's not, you're not sending anything physical through. And I know, he had his idea of looped time and similar to, did you see the movie Contact? Carl Sagan
yes.
wrote the novel.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. When she's in the pod and it drops down into that swirling vortex that's created by those giant circular loops.
Like an egg beater.
Wormhole. So it's really similar to that concept, and that wormhole will literally take you wherever you want to go in the universe. But yeah, it's something that I think probably in our lifetimes we will, I'm hoping for Mr. Mallet's sake, we will be able to find a way to send a bit of information, and or bit of information or a particle. But wow, the technology that we would need, you have to move, in order for mass to move through a wormhole like that. I mean, you would need some kind of infinite force behind it. And so many people, I know Frank Tipler had this idea of cylinders that were infinite in size that were spinning so quickly that same idea, that it created a vortex. But everything always ends up with infinite in size, because that's how much energy you would need to move something like that through. We just don't have any kind of technology like that. Now, Michio Kaku thinks there are other civilizations out there that might. Right. Alien civilizations far from the future, but we humans don't. So,
well, that's interesting, because that's one of the theories behind the UFO phenomena, is that they're time travelers.
Right. Oh yeah. I was really shocked too to find out that there was a time travel link even to the Roswell story. That there was a general who was very high up, who claimed that he had access to all of the information, the crash wreckage and the aliens themselves, and that they were not only time travelers, interdimensional time travelers, but that they were us from the future.
Whoa.
We have no proof of that, but...
Well, but that, I mean, that's the big question. If time travel is possible, people say, well, why aren't there a bunch of time travelers walking around now saying, hey, I'm from the future?
Exactly. Well, there are some. But do we believe them? And that's Stephen Hawking. I mean, that was his big idea that, well, hey, come on, if they're here, where are they? Well, and nobody could really ever counter that except to say that, maybe they just did a drive-by, or they didn't want to be seen. They didn't want to be observed. They could be here. We don't know it. Maybe we can't see them if they're interdimensional. But, yeah, that was his big question.
Well, you can't travel you couldn't travel back any further than when the time machine is created and then turned on, right?
Right,
so
exactly.
if I create a time machine tomorrow, then in the future, the farthest people can ever travel back in time would be to August 6th, 2012.
Right, exactly. So if they want to go to August 5th, they're, SOL.
There was nothing going on today.
So many limitations and blocks, and why don't we just forget it and focus on something else? But no, I mean, this is one of the quests of humanity to master time, and we're not going to give up till we do it.
Unless we already have, and it's sitting in a warehouse somewhere, a government warehouse, locked up in a box. We'll discuss the possibility that maybe we already have devised a time machine. Back with more of my conversation with Marie Jones. This book is From the Future, a journey through portals, relativity, wormholes, and other adventures in time travel. Join the adventure.
This is Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Follow Richard on Twitter @Richard Syrett. For show information, visit the website strangeplanet.ca.
Marie Jones is with us. This book is From the Future, co-written by her partner, Larry Flaxman. And how many books is this for you now, Marie?
For me, it's 10.
10. Wow.
5 with Larry. This is our 5th book together.
2013, The End of Days or A New Beginning, Supervolcano, the catastrophic event that changed the course of human history. You wrote that one with your dad, right?
I did, yeah.
1111, The Time Prompt Phenomenon, The Trinity Secret, the Deja Vu Enigma. Well, the Deja Vu Enigma, that we sort of touched on that earlier, how Deja Vu may in fact be sort of a time travel, although, the skeptics, God bless the skeptics and the debunkers, they love to keep us pinned to the ground. They have these wonderful romantic explanations for things. Well, Deja Vu is because one optical nerve is shorter than the other. Thanks.
Yeah, people who are lying about Deja Vu.
Right. But how is Deja Vu a time travel experience, do you think?
Well, it's more of a possible multiverse or parallel universe experience, because the idea is, and yet here I'll explain how it's related to time travel. when people have deja vu, most of the time the sensation that you get is that you exist in two places at once, where you're doing the same thing, talking to the same person, saying the same words. You know what words are going to come out of their mouth next. It's like you're having a dual experience or a memory of something that is happening as it happens, which of course is impossible. How can you have a memory of something that's happening as it happens? But that's what it is. Where the idea of time and time travel comes into play is that a lot of people who have deja vu also have what we call add-on experiences. So, for example, some people may have deja vu when they're in a certain location and they get a sense that they've been there before. They may get a flashback to a past life, or just a vision or a flashback of that location with them in it, but it's 1,000 years earlier. Other people may have a deja vu event and also experience a precognitive vision or notion that may come true later. We talked to some people who actually, this is interesting, who had a dream of something and then 2-3 weeks later had deja vu. And right at that time, what they dreamt about happened. And in this one particular case, it was a car accident. The person was actually able to avoid getting killed because they had not only had a precognitive dream, but the deja vu sort of served as a wake-up reminder. So deja vu is such a fascinating phenomenon because it's linked to so many other things. You know, the skeptics have tried to explain it away as a memory glitch, a brain glitch, a one-eye perception before the other, and none of those have really worked. There's an awful lot of real serious scientific research going on into deja vu because there is the idea that it is some kind of perception of another level of reality. So it may not involve any kind of time, but some people do report that it does. I've never had a past life deja vu. Mine are always just feeling like I'm in two places at once and everything is happening at the same time. But
back in the, I think it was the 60s, there was a book that came out. It's since fairly recently been translated, but it was this eccentric priest, and he claimed that the Vatican had a time machine. I think his name was Father Ernetti or something, and it was called the chronovisor.
Right. Yes, we have a little thing about it in the book. Yeah, and let me see if I can find it, because it's very little information on that, obviously.
Yes, but Father Ernetti now, if I'm remembering correctly, Father Ernetti claimed that he had devised this chronovisor device, and he could look, he could look back into the depths of time.
Right.
But
nobody ever saw it. That's the problem. We've had people who claim that they were part of DARPA.
Yes.
There are people that claim that they were part of these experiments. That DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, for those who don't know what DARPA stands for. Well, there are a number of people that are out there doing interviews and events and YouTube videos claiming that they were part of a project involving time travel. Andrew Bishago,
Project Pegasus,
Exactly. And there's a number of different experiments that may have been done at different times. One of them involves something called the Montauk chair.
Yes.
And this was done at Montauk, which many people who have looked into the Philadelphia experiment, these, what we call time travel conspiracies, that this Montauk was in Camp Hero, New York, a location where supposed top secret research was done involving manipulation of the electromagnetic field. But there are also people who claim that they were doing time travel experimentation involving this type of chair that you could sit in, and it would enter a wormhole, and you would go into the future, go into the past. These people were told to gather information or to observe things. I know Andy Pirro claimed that he went back to World War II. So there are several gentlemen that we write about, Dr. Dan Burish, who claimed he worked for the Majestic program, Area 51, where they had Project Looking Glass.
All right, we're breaking up a little bit there, but we'll take a time out, do some business, come back, and continue to discuss time travel. And I wouldn't mind just talking about Andrew Bishago and Project Pegasus just for a moment. I had an opportunity to sit and talk with him at length, so we can discuss that as well. Marie Jones, this book is from the future.
As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Welcome back. This book is from the future. That's the latest book from Marie Jones and her partner Larry Flaxman. A journey through portals, relativity, wormholes, and other adventures in time travel. And we were mentioning DARPA and some of these other programs that allegedly are involved in time travel experiments. Mm-hmm. And the name Andrew Bishego came up, and Project Pegasus. And I've had Andrew on the show a couple of times, and I met with him and spoke to him at length for my TV show when he was living up in the state of Washington, in Vancouver, Washington. Anyway, seems like a very intelligent. He's a very likable guy, and I came away, thinking he's either a great actor because he delivers, this scenario with such sincerity and believability, or right. He's delusional, or I don't know, he's a highly trained disinformation agent. I don't know what to make of the story, except that it's so detailed and so.
That's it. The detail is amazing, and it's repeated. And this is the problem that I have, and I would never ever claim to know the truth because I wasn't there, but I have a real problem with anybody who can remember that much detail, because I can't remember what I ate for lunch yesterday.
Right. Exactly.
And I've had this discussion with a number of people that some of these gentlemen will tell the same story, and I'm not saying story that it's fictional, I'm just saying what happened, what they believe happened, with such detail that never changes. And we're talking names, dates, what people were wearing, locations, and it never changes, and it's very precise. And yet most of us, we can't remember what we did yesterday. And we certainly can't remember what other people were wearing, these things happened quite a while ago. So that's one of the things that always comes up when we talk about the chrononaut stories. Are they savants? Are they disinformation specialists that have photographic memories? Or did this happen to them and it's so ingrained in their being because it was just so amazing that they remember every detail? Maybe when something like that happens to you, you literally, you're like a sponge. But that's the same problem. I'm so glad you said the word details, because that was the problem that I had. How do they remember this so well? It's amazing. And but then it sort of crosses the line, because the whole idea that Barack Obama was one of the chrononauts, a lot of people then was announced. So it's like, maybe this really was happening. Maybe DARPA really did have some research going into what they called quantum tunneling and time warp fields and wormholes, because certainly these theories have been around for a long time. And we all know that there's research going on that we're not made privy to. So maybe there's something to it. But then you hear something like, Barack Obama went to Mars, and it just, to me, blows all credibility.
Well, that sounds like someone who is setting up the straw man argument. So you've got maybe someone who's out there talking about legitimate time travel experiments, and so maybe someone from naval intelligence who wants to discredit that person creates the straw man and says, oh, look at this person over here. He's making such ridiculous arguments in favor of time travel.
How can it be true?
Yeah, they're all crazy.
Absolutely right. And you just have no idea what to believe. And, and these are people who are genuine and likable. But again, it's that attention to detail that just blows my mind, because doing research for these books, I like to think that I can remember a lot of things. I don't remember half of what's in this book without having to go back and look through it, let alone be able to recite something that happened to me, back in the 70s? Forget it. I couldn't do it.
But do you think that a DARPA or whomever is actually experimenting with, I don't know, time dilation or something? I mean, you got to figure.
Probably. I'm sure they are. But here's, like I said, there's research going on out at CERN at the collider with particles and black holes and trying to find parallel universes. But here's the problem that I have. If DARPA or the Department of Defense or anybody else is doing this stuff, I would tend to think that they would be engaging, and who knows, maybe they are, the most brilliant theoretical physicists out there. Now, when you have guys like Brian Greene and Michio Kaku and Stephen Hawking and Lisa Randall, all these brilliant physicists who are still struggling with the theory of time travel, I would kind of think that they might be in the loop if there really was time travel research going on.
One would think.
If saying it's impossible at this point, then I would question their education. I don't know. I see a little bit of a disconnect there between the scientists that are out there talking about time travel and what the government or military, quote unquote, them might be doing. But who knows?
I recently met with two members of the Roadrunners International. This is a group made up primarily of former military, former CIA, and former defense contractors who have some connection to Area 51 or Groom Lake or whatever they're calling it these days. And some of these people worked on the U-2 spy plane. And anyway, these two gentlemen could not confirm that they worked in Area 51, but they hinted very strongly that they did. And I was sort of asking them about the whole, what is Area 51 being used for? Are they back engineering UFO technology? Are they doing alien autopsies and so forth? And they said, what's going on inside Area 51 is far more interesting than that. And my jaw hit the floor. I said, what could possibly...
What could be more interesting than that?
Yes, they were saying that the stuff that's going on inside Area 51, first of all, they assured me it's all man-made. It has nothing to do with, extraterrestrials. They said, but the technology there is 50 years beyond what you can even imagine. And that's where the security is so tight. They said, if this stuff were to be made known to the public, we wouldn't be able to cope with it. We wouldn't be able to fathom what's going on there.
I'm thinking interdimensional, parallel universes, time travel. I mean, those are the mind-blowing things.
Exactly.
It's hard to know. I mean, it's not hard. I mean, it's one thing to accept that they're aliens because I think we've been bombarded with pop culture and this sort of prepared us for that. But yeah, if somebody were to say to me, hey, guess what? At Area 51, they've proven that there are 16,000 parallel universes and you exist in 8 of them. We saw you. That might blow my mind a little.
Yeah. Well, and they went on to explain that it was the U.S. military that created the whole UFO a buzz as a cover story because people would be so sort of hypnotized and preoccupied with that their attention would be diverted to what's really going on there, which, as they say, is even far more mind-blowing. Which
that's gonna break a whole lot of hearts, though, for people that really want there to be aliens and UFOs. So you'd be like, you're kidding. All you have out there are parallel universes? Gee, thanks.
The great disappointment.
Absolutely. I mean, time travel, if the public is interested in it, you got to know that the people with the power and the brains are way ahead of us. I can't even imagine what they might be doing that's 50 years ahead of anything imaginable.
No, it boggles the mind. Jean is in Etobicoke. Hello, Jean. Welcome to the Conspiracy Show.
Oh, yes. Hello. I love your show, by the way.
Thank you.
And, yes, there was a movie that I really enjoyed. It was called Somewhere in Time.
Oh, a classic. Is that that's the one with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he went back in time, and what brought him back to present day, he had a coin in his pocket that was from the future, and that apparently that brought him back from the past to the future.
It was sort of a marker or a trigger.
Right. Well, it's certainly a very romantic portrayal.
Would he be lying on the bed trying to hypnotize himself to go back? You're not really sure if his whole body leaves. It sounds ridiculous, but
that's the magic of movies, is that they can tell you these wonderful stories that might be based on a little bit of science and theory. But, that's the wonderful thing about fiction and films is that they can take the ideas of real science and just really go to town with them. But, it's all based on things that scientists at the time were actually thinking about and talking about. And actually, hypnosis is one form of mental time travel that is taken seriously as a way to send the brain, the memory and consciousness into another time.
Yes, and the whole idea of regression is very controversial, and
Right.
whether you
Just
can
like regression,
or whether you can recover repressed memories and so forth.
Right.
Because it's an interesting concept whether the past is actually sort of an objective thing. I mean, is there just one past? Everyone perceives the
Right.
past very differently, and so which
Right.
past are you going back to?
Exactly.
The world does seem to remain transfixed with the whole idea. We had Somewhere in Time, which is about 1980, I think that came out, and then I think probably most recently was The Time Traveler's Wife, which came out a couple of years ago, which is actually a pretty good movie.
It was. There's one coming out with Bruce Willis called Looper. I think that's coming out in a month or maybe even less. And what's his name? Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who plays a younger version of Bruce Willis. There have been so many time travel movies and books and TV shows. Obviously, it's an obsession and a fascination that is not going to go away until we figure it out, if we ever do.
Paradoxes aside, Marie, if you could travel to the past, where would you go? When would you go?
I would go back to my early childhood. That's it. Most people say, oh, high school or college. Oh, hell no. I would go back to my early childhood, or I would go back to when my son was younger so I could relive his years.
That's lovely.
But I don't think I would really want to go back. I'm happy with the way it is, and I don't want to mess anything up. I would be afraid.
That's true. Yeah, the paradoxes. Yeah, it's a minefield for sure. And the future? Would you be interested in traveling to the future?
No. I want it to be a surprise. Unless it was way in the future where it wasn't going to involve me anyway. But no, I think I want my future to be. See, my fear would be is that if I knew something was going to happen, I would either make it happen when maybe it shouldn't have, or not make it happen when it should have. So I'd rather not know.
Good answers, because I think the danger in wanting to travel to the future, preoccupying yourself with the past,
Right.
people that are mired in nostalgia, is that they're missing out on the ever present now, right?
Absolutely. And aren't we humans like that? We live half our lives worrying about the past, half our lives worrying about the future. We're never in the present moment where we should be.
Exactly. And so, but let's look ahead to the future. What are you working on, Marie? And what's up next?
Oh, my gosh. Well, Larry and I just pitched a couple of ideas to our publisher, so we don't really know what we're doing next with that, but a lot of promotion for this book, speaking at some big events coming up, and it's all on our website, which is paraexplorers.com. Always keeping busy.
What else do you do at Para Explorers?
That's just our website for we do books. We've written a couple of screenplays together. We're thinking about doing a fictional series based on some of the research in our books. We have our own radio show now called Parafringe Radio on every other Tuesday. And we have, ebooks that we're doing. So that's just sort of the dumping ground for everything that Larry and I do together. I have my own website, which is mariedjones.com. But everything that Larry and I have together can be seen at Para Explorers.
Marie, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure as well. Thank you so much.
All right. Good night.
Good.
Marie Jones. This book is from the future. And I've got a website I can plug as well, richardsyrett.com, SYRETT.com. And that's where you'll find all the information about upcoming shows, past shows. There's even a classified document a page where you can look up declassified. Oh, it's all good stuff. Check it out, richardsyrett.com.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.